Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, Governor Andy Beshear announces a new build-ready site in Jackson County, how the property is expected to be used. And Supreme Court justices appear skeptical of Colorado's effort to exclude former President Trump from the state's primary ballot. We'll take a look at the arguments and the implications on the 2024 presidential race.
Plus, wet weather is on the way for your Super Bowl weekend. Those details coming up as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Governor Andy Beshear announced a site in Jackson County is now build-ready certified. WYMT's Chandler Wilcox talked to the judge executive about how it could make an economic impact.
19 years ago, a business that employed nearly 700 people caught on fire in Jackson County.
700 people lost their job, and you take a county that has 13,000 people in it, and you lose 700 jobs in one day, you fall off a financial cliff and an economic cliff.
Jackson County Judge Executive Shane Gabbard says years later, the county now owns the property and is looking at what it can be used for.
So we've been kind of crawling back up a little at a time. We're starting to see daylight now.
A build-ready certification approved by state officials means that daylight is getting a little brighter and the property is becoming more attractive to business owners.
When you get a status like this that says to developers, hey, we've got a place and we've got a workforce, that's something that we've been working to try to get.
Gabbard says the workforce is ready for the opportunity.
Jackson County has some of the hardest working people that you'll find in the Commonwealth, and our surrounding counties do as well.
The judge executive also says the location of the property at the industrial park makes a difference.
We're 20 minutes from I-75, and that's very important, especially for truck traffic and delivery status, things like that. And it's real easy to find.
Gabbard says they do not yet have a company lined up to build on the property. In Jackson County, Chandler Wilcox, WYMT Mountain News.
The build-ready site is more than 17 acres and has a 140,000 square foot building pad.
Well, enjoy the dry weather this evening because we are tracking an increase in that moisture as we go into tonight, on Friday, and on your weekend as well. So we are tracking some dry and cloudy weather over in Southwest Virginia. From UVA-wise, that current temperature sitting at 54 degrees up to 62 in Jackson, 61 for Manchester, Harlan, also Pikeville, and 57 for Middlesboro, also in Williamsburg at this hour. So once again, we are well above average as we go into this evening. Up on the radar, we are dry, but notice clouds continue to increase as that next rainmaker is not too far away. As we zoom out, we are tracking some moisture over western Kentucky, also western Tennessee. Notice no severe weather, nothing too widespread, but a few sprinkles are possible as we go into this evening, also by late tonight and early on your Friday. Those low temperatures this evening are not as cool as you wake up on Friday thanks to an increase in those clouds. Most of us wake up in the upper 40s, and again, we are watching out for a few hit or miss sprinkles by late tonight, early Friday, and some more widespread rain chances on tap as we go into your Super Bowl weekend, and then trending cooler as we go into next week. All those details plus your full 7-day forecast coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thank you. The University of Pennsylvania submitted documents yesterday evening to the Congressional Committee investigating anti-Semitism on the UPenn campus. That's according to Nick Barley, a spokesperson for the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. It's not clear yet how many documents the Ivy League school turned over. A spokesperson for UPenn did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Former Donald Trump advisor Peter Navarro has been ordered to report to prison. Today, a judge denied his request to remain free while he appeals his conviction. Last month, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison for defying a congressional subpoena in the January 6 Capitol attack probe. It's not clear when Navarro will be required to report to prison. His lawyer has not responded to a request for comment. For more than 2 hours, Supreme Court justices questioned lawyers about whether the state of Colorado can disqualify former President Trump from appearing on that state's primary ballot. Nearly all of the justices questioned whether upholding Colorado's decision would unfairly impact voters in other states. CBS's Skylar Henry has more from the Supreme Court.
Conservative and liberal Supreme Court justices alike seemed very skeptical of Colorado's Supreme Court ruling that former President Trump is ineligible to be on that state's ballot due to his connection with the January 6th insurrection.
What's a state doing deciding who gets to, who other citizens get to vote for president?
Colorado relied on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, implemented after the Civil War, which says no person shall hold any office who took an oath as an officer of the United States, but then engaged in an insurrection.
The framers were concerned about charismatic rebels who might rise through the ranks up to and including the presidency of the United States.
The thing that really is troubling to me is I totally understand your argument, but they were listing people that were barred, and president is not there.
The justices largely avoided arguments about whether the former president engaged in an insurrection on January 6th, focusing instead on the ballot access.
I think they are headed towards a fairly consensus ruling on what power states have to resolve this matter, but it could set us up for a big political discussion later on.
That's because former President Trump potentially still faces criminal trials surrounding the events of January 6th.
We could have a lot of discussion and potentially disruption around the idea that Donald Trump, if he won the election in November, he might not be qualified to serve as president of the United States.
Speaking outside of his Mar-a-Lago home, Trump called today's hearing another form of election interference.
You have millions of people that are out there wanting to vote, and they happen to want to vote for me.
The court is expected to issue its ruling in the next couple of weeks. Skyler Henry, CBS News, the Supreme Court.
Former President Trump is claiming the criminal cases against him should be tossed because he has presidential immunity. The lower courts have rejected that claim, but Trump's attorneys are expected to appeal that decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. President Biden will not face charges for keeping some classified documents at his Delaware home once he left office as vice president. Special counsel Robert Hur's report concludes President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified national security information from his days in the Obama administration. The case shares some similarities with the classified documents former President Donald Trump kept at Mar-a-Lago. Trump is also accused of obstructing government efforts to get the documents back, but he says he did nothing wrong. Recent polling in Wisconsin shows that President Biden and former President Trump are deadlocked in a hypothetical race for the White House. According to the Marquette University Law School poll, Biden and Trump are tied at 49% among registered voters in that battleground state. 2% said they are undecided, but polling shows President Biden would not fare as well if he were to face Nikki Haley on the ballot. From the executive to the legislative branch, Congress is calling on the Federal Aviation Administration to change how it addresses mental health for pilots. In a letter to the FAA, a bipartisan group of 45 members said it must, quote, reduce the stigma around the issue. This comes on the heels of an incident in October when an off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot had an in-flight breakdown. Pilots who currently say they have some sort of mental problem during mandatory physicals could lose their ability to fly. Two JetBlue planes collided on the tarmac at Boston's Logan International Airport this morning. No one was hurt. The Federal Aviation Administration says JetBlue Flight 777 was entering a de-icing pad when it made contact with Flight 551 on an adjacent de-icing pad. The de-icing pads are part of the taxiway controlled by the airline, not air traffic controllers. Both planes sustained minor damage. The FAA is investigating. 5 missing U.S. Marines are now confirmed to have died following a helicopter crash. They were flying yesterday from an Air Force base to San Diego in a storm, but they never made it. CBS's Jonathan Vigliotti has an update from near the crash site.
Person is on site checking for survivors.
Rescue crews used 4x4s, drones, and even hiked in on foot, eventually reaching the remains of 5 U.S. Marines. They went missing in the mountains after their military cargo helicopter disappeared Tuesday night during a storm.
Warstar at that location has visual on the crash site.
Yesterday, the helicopter was found in a remote area near the Cleveland National Forest, 12 hours after it went missing. The condition of the aircraft is still unclear. The CH-53E Super Stallion, which is used mainly for transportation and heavy lifting, took off from Creech Air Force Base just outside Las Vegas, headed for the Marine Corps Air Station in Miramar near San Diego, when the last ping from the aircraft's location came in around 11:30 p.m. Tuesday. 3 hours later, search teams across multiple agencies were launched when the chopper was presumed missing.
They had to go on foot to search the area of the coordinates of the last known location of that helicopter.
As the West Coast was hit with a historic storm, the chopper's flight path through the San Diego mountains would have meant difficult flying conditions. But retired Marine Colonel and former helicopter pilot Eric Bouyer tells CBS News he doesn't think the weather caused the crash.
I immediately began to think something mechanical happened. It's a 53 Echo, a big, stable platform. To simply go missing is rare, is very rare.
And the U.S. military says this search effort has now transitioned into a recovery mission. What caused this crash is part of an ongoing investigation. Jonathan Vigliotti, CBS News, Pine Valley, California.
Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, more than 40% of Americans say they've kept a financial secret from their partner, often leading to arguments. Experts take a look at ways to combine and discuss finances.
Plus, we are mild in the short term, but a cool down is on the way. Those details after this break.